Welcome, Bulldog fans, to another Monday with Joe Moorhead. Steve, I think the two predominant themes from today's press conference, one, you've got a couple of teams both on losing streaks coming in, so somebody's got to win this weekend in Fayetteville. But secondly, let's get to the main story, injuries. That was a long list that Coach Joe Moorhead gave us today of guys who are questionable for this week or, in the case of now, one or two new players out for this week, one for the rest of the season.
Yeah, it's true. Fletcher Adams, that's a big loss to the defensive line. I mean, he's a veteran guy. He's been around and patiently kind of waited his turn and played behind some guys, that have been very talented. And you hate to see it end like that, especially for a senior, and because you're already so many games into this thing. There's no hope of a medical hardship or anything of that nature, and it's just devastating. Somebody else will have to step up. Jerrigan Jones, a guy that's turned some heads as a freshman, had a pretty good ball game Saturday. He is out this weekend, and you had Cam Dancer out last week, and now that's a little bit questionable. But and one of the things, too, David, there's a lot of these younger guys, I know that they want to get playing time. The thing that I always notice when you're having a difficult season is how much lengthier the injury list gets with the veteran guys later in the season. That's something to keep an eye on.
Or how those injuries seem to last a week or two longer than maybe they would have back in September when the sense of urgency wasn't quite there. But, yeah, he ran a bunch of players. Stuart Reese is also questionable for this week as well. He did not play at Arkansas, nor did Greg Island. He was not on today's list, so you feel better about him being able to go this weekend. In fact, we were told later that he was a game day decision up at Texas A&M. And, of course, State, the secondary, again, they're without Maurice Smith in the rest of the year. And let's see, C.J. Morgan was on the iffy list for this week as well. And he had some good plays, a good tackle that drew a flag, which wasn't necessary. But the point being, Steve, that secondary, which we thought would be a strength of this team, is taking a lot of hits to the injury bug.
No doubt about it. And, Martin Emerson's a guy that's, he's had his ups and downs, but we expect some big things from him throughout his Bulldog career here. Brian Cole, I thought, had a pretty good ball game on Saturday, one of his best in the uniform. Sean Preston comes on in relief, and C.J. Morgan has a career-high 5 tackles. And so you're beginning to get some production out of some of those guys, but it's not the guys you intended to play with. You expected to have Cam Dantzler and Maurice Smitherman. Neither played last weekend. Smitherman, of course, lost for the season, as you mentioned. C.J. Morgan goes down. So it's like the depth of this unit has really been taxed. And we've got some guys this weekend at Arkansas that can pitch it and catch it a little bit. And so I'm sure they're probably licking their chops a little bit thinking, you know what, they're going to put some very young and inexperienced guys out there, and I'm sure they see this as a winnable ball game, much like Mississippi State does.
On the offensive side, Reese is the only guy mentioned there, and his place was taken in the starting lineup by Michael Story. But in the course of the game, LaQuinston Sharp took over, and I thought the offense got better with him out there as well, so that's kind of a credit to him. You start patching those things together. Do you feel like you need to make some changes in the offensive line at this point? Because once the line got better, Kylin Hill himself got better.
Yeah, David, I was worried about that. We got word late last week that Reese and Allen were not expected to play, and then you wonder, okay, well, who's going to start? You put Michael Story and Tommy Champion in. Tommy Champion's kind of a, jack of all trades, I guess you could say, as an offensive lineman. He's played up and down the line. But you did mention LaQuinston Sharp, and things did kind of settle with him in the ball game. So I would think this week, in practice at the very least, he'll get the opportunity to run with the ones, and then you kind of see how things develop. And hopefully everybody else, you get some of those walking wounded back and be ready to go. But I expected more difficulty with the offensive line than maybe we had. And so maybe they grew up a little bit. Maybe you've discovered some things in that second half, at least from an offensive line standpoint. And you mentioned Kylin Hill, and I asked Joe specifically about that. Kylin looked like the Kylin Hill of earlier in the season. And he meets an A&M linebacker in the hole and just blasts through him and breaks one for 30-some-odd yards. That's the Kylin Hill State needs in November in order for State to earn bowl eligibility. And at this point, it's a week-to-week proposition. But in order for State to make the next step, Kylin Hill has to be a big part of the offense. And I thought had his best game in a month this past Saturday.
And I'm sorry you weren't there with us in Aggie Land because it was an interesting setting there in the sidelines. I was a little worried about the lack of energy in the fourth quarter at times, but that happens to a team that's in a 4-game losing streak. But Moorhead said they had a good practice yesterday and seemed to get the energy and excitement back for this week because, again, they see this, much as you say, as a winnable game for them. In fact, I believe the people who out in a desert town in Nevada who talk about these things a lot seem to think highly of the Bulldogs this weekend as well, which may be quite a comment when both those teams have total 9-game losing streak coming into this one. But Kylin Hill, to me, would seem to be a key there because he made a very interesting comment when we talked to him in the postgame that he quit being a finesse player during the game, which he had been the previous games, and just came the hard-nosed power runner he's better at, and you saw the results. 2 carries, 75 yards, 150 yards total, a touchdown. How much difference would Kylin Hill, being the Kylin Hill of September, make, not just for this offense general, but for Garrett Schrader at his quarterback position?
Well, if State's going to get to a ball game this year, it's going to be because Kylin Hill carries them there. That's as simple as I can make it. I mean, Garrett Schrader needs a complement, and that's what Kylin Hill provides. And I think when you have a quarterback that wants to run as much as Garrett Schrader does, and he's very skilled at it, defenses begin to kind of key on him, and I think that opens up some things for Kylin. I did like the commitment early to try to get the ball to Kylin in space, even though Garrett threw about a 95-mile-an-hour fastball out there. The thought process was there. And so in order for State, I think we probably need him to run for 600 yards down the stretch here to give State a realistic chance to get bowl eligible. But the good thing is, David, as bad as the schedule has been, a lot of 11 a.m. kicks, basically on the road it seems like all the time. It sets up for 3 out of 4 at home in November. Mississippi State fans need to be here. Kylin Hill, Garrett Schrader got to have good ball games, and you've got to find a way to clean up these turnovers. That it continues to be a burr in the Bulldogs' saddle.
Yes, Coach Moore had made a big point of that early in his talk today, that for the last 3 games, State is -7 in the turnover category. The last 2 games, -6. And against the teams you're playing, particularly LSU, but even A&M, you can't give them that many extra possessions, and which is what they've done. So in that regard, for the Bulldog offense to achieve what they've done, is maybe some encouragement there. Yes, it's hard for us to say that because we'll be accused of what do they call us when we try to point out positive points, sunshine or something. But the fact is, you saw some skill position plays from the runners, the throwers, and the receivers. Stephen Guidry, Isaiah Zuber had a big game there at A&M as well. You're seeing some things come together that you ask, well, why wasn't it there early in the season, the winnable games, but better late than never, you would have to say at this point. Anything else really jump out at you today from what was really a kind of a short press conference?
Yeah, the shortest one of the year, and that's not a criticism of Joe Moorhead or Mississippi State. The reporters just didn't have a lot of questions today, and maybe we've heard it all and seen it all before. But the thing that I think about with Arkansas, David, is last year Mississippi State absolutely destroyed Arkansas, 52-6. Nick Fitzgerald with a big ball game. 2 years ago, we went to Fayetteville and really kicked our way into trouble. And that's we talked about that earlier. Mississippi State should be the better team, and I agree with Vegas. But this team is so unpredictable and so inconsistent. I don't think Arkansas can stay with State unless State helps them. But Mississippi State has helped the competition throughout the year. You go back to 2017, you muff a punt, you give them a touchdown. You fumble a ball in the end zone, you give them a touchdown. You kick a fumble 50 yards down the field, they recover it, they cash in a touchdown. So it's like you begin to look at this. Mississippi State can't get in their own way this week. This is an absolutely desperate situation. If State has any chance whatsoever of making a ball game, they have to win this Saturday. And this has got to be probably the best week of practice of the year.
And not only the best week of practice, but getting back to what I saw on the sideline in the fourth quarter, when, yes, a game's out of reach, and previous games as well. And watching the team show up in first quarters, or rather not show up in first quarters, particularly offensively, and Moore had mentioned that. He said early in the season you had a track record of first series scores, and that has not happened in the last 6 games. So, as you say, this team cannot afford to play from behind the way that 17 or 16 teams could afford to. They've got to set a tone. Steve, to me, that doesn't come down to X's and O's or tactics or even practice. It comes down to mindset and attitude, things like that, things that are really beyond a coach's control. Again, we're not at practice, so we don't get to watch a lot of this. But your takeaway from our observations during games and the players we talked to in midweek, do you see the leadership, the intangibles, this team can pull itself together and, quite frankly, in every sense of the word, become a team in time to play these winnable games?
That's the million-dollar question, David, is like, where's leadership on this team? We're about to find out if they have leadership or not. And that's one of the things we discussed early on is that, Garrett Schrader was a freshman, but he kind of led by example. Kylin Hill was a guy that's a very emotional guy. I think he could be a real spark plug for this team, not just offensively but defensively, because if he's running hard, the defense responds to that. The Bulldog defense will respond when the offense is putting up points. The problem that we've had is that State's been playing from behind so much. You've got to go out and win that first quarter on Saturday. You can't give Arkansas any room to breathe. Not only that, too, but it becomes that self-fulfilling prophecy, David, of here we go again. You cannot have a slow start at Arkansas this weekend and hope to win that ball game. And if you lose that ball game this weekend, the rest of the season is going to be pretty rotten.
Would totally agree with that. But we'll talk again before we head off to Fayetteville. Steve and I will both be there. The team is back reunited. Congratulations on the opening of your book this weekend. I know you were at some signings, had a great response. Close to 1,000 in sales already at this point, and only going to increase. More to come. Put in the plug. Great Christmas present for all you Bulldog fans out there, and maybe a good present you want to give to your favorite, Rebels out there, because they like reading about history too, don't they?
Well, they live in it. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's the kind of their favorite topic. That most of the Ole Miss grads that I know have a BS degree in revisionist history.
I will not make a comment on what he referred to by those initials at this point. But anyway, we'll be talking again, and then we'll be reuniting for a 3 o'clock kickoff at Reynolds Razorback Stadium in Fayetteville. Haven't checked the weather forecast, but it's been pretty miserable the last 2 trips, so maybe I really don't want to know at this point. And by the way, congratulations to all you Bulldogs that I saw in College Station and as well as at Tennessee. You're following this team. We appreciate your support there. I enjoy talking to all of you, and hopefully this weekend we'll have something better to talk about. But between now and then, we'll have our offensive interviews on Tuesday, defensive interviews, and a coach on Wednesday as well. And then it's time to get ready for November and the stretch run of this Bulldog team as they decide the fate of year 2 under Coach Joe Moorhead. For our team here at the James Page 24/7, for Steve Robertson and Mike Nemeth, this is David Murray.